Welcome back to Good Distinctions. I'm your host, Will Wright, and joining me today is TJ Burdick. TJ, welcome.
Hey, how's it going, Will?
Doing well. Well, we are talking about TJ's article on Catholic Exchange, Are You Smarter Than AI? It's fantastic. You know, if you've been listening to Good Distinctions, our tagline is Good Distinctions are the spice of life. TJ is actually a lay Dominican, which I'm very excited about, so he'll love this. Good Distinctions comes from the maxim of St. Thomas Aquinas: seldom affirm, never deny, always make distinctions. So we're always trying to find the best distinctions here at Good Distinctions. And there's a lot to be made when it comes to artificial intelligence, technology, and our lives, sort of, frankly, I mean, we were talking before the show, addicted to our screens in a lot of ways. Uh, TJ and I, it seems, have broken free a little bit of that, detached ourselves. That's TJ's book, Detached, if you want to check that out. But TJ, I'll just start by asking you this. What got you into thinking about AI technology? Before we started recording, you said it hit very close to home, and we have a very similar experience. So why don't you kick us off, just starting there?
Of course. When my first son was born, and this is my third child, so it took a little bit of time for me to realize. But when he was born, I was at kind of a little bit of a peak when it comes to the social media of Catholicism. I know Brandon Vaught had just published his book, The Church in New Media. I was definitely a big follower. I did a lot of online evangelization back in around, 2014 all the way to about 2018. And it was kind of like the mission that I felt called to because there was all this new media and I was pretty quick to pick it up. And it seemed like it was, fit like a glove almost as a ministry for me because yes, I had to be at home with my children and work full time, but there was this little itty bitty, device in my pocket that I could use to be able to evangelize. And I think a lot of us at the beginning stages of the new evangelization kind of felt this bug of wanting to be able to proclaim the gospel and, be the next Fulton J. Sheen, but on Twitter and figure out a way to use these technologies to do the things that God was quote unquote calling us to do. But as I was saying, my son was born, and I realized very quickly around this time that I was becoming addicted to my screens, specifically to my phone, and it was something that I think a lot of us really felt that little darkness that technology kind of hangs over us, that shadow of constant use where we realized that, you know what, this isn't really doing it for me. And there's this spiritual darkness inside of me because of this black light screen that's shining on my face all the time. And so I kind of started my journey through tech addiction, and I ended up writing a book about it that was published with OSV called Detached, Put Your Phone in Its Place. And ultimately, I became a technology critic. And not only did I mean, there was a lot of people who were doing that. You had, Cal Newport's one that pops up and a whole bunch of different authors that were writing books about, how technology is so addicting and we need to make sure we put all these safeguards. And even the phone companies were putting these new screen time apps so that just
Mhm.
to make people aware of how much time they were spending on their screens. And the one thing that I realized is that there was nobody speaking to the spiritual side of things.
Hmm.
There was no Catholic voice out there that was saying, "Hey, hey, hey, wait a minute. This might not be good for you." We had a whole bunch of different psychologists, doctors, even philosophers that were out there talking about, oh, screens probably aren't the best thing for us. But there was nobody really speaking for the Catholic side of things. And so since then is when I really started to really critique my own use of technology and to really think about ways that I could use that as a way to evangelize people because it's hard to, it's kind of a catch-22. You're using technology to evangelize people to get off technology, and it's really strange, but it's definitely something that has been on my heart and soul and my mind, and I think a lot of people based on the type of feedback I'm getting from these articles, a lot of people are feeling the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that as well. When my first son was born in 2017, I had a very similar sort of realization that I'm on my phone far too much. And like you said before, we were recording, babies are kind of boring. They're very beautiful. You love looking at them, but if they're sleeping, what are you gonna do? You're gonna, scroll mindlessly on your phone. But I'm gonna be honest, it was only a few months ago that I actually kicked social media. Like I deleted it all. I
Good for
kept
you.
coming back. Well, I kept coming back. So it's like, okay, I got rid of social media, and my wife made fun of me. She said, "All right, sure." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "This is the third time you've deleted social media." But it's stuck. It's been about 3 or 4 months now, and I haven't even had the urge to download it back again. And I've realized that there's been a tremendous peace in my life. The
Yeah.
other piece is like you were saying with this desire to evangelize. The desire to evangelize is great. It's very, very good. And the ability to be able to reach people with technology that we have today is it's incomparable. In the entire history of the world, we've never had this situation. So there needs to be some leveraging of it. So this is where I think, I mean, it sounds like you and I are in agreement that it's not an all or nothing thing. Like there's good usages, there's good, it's virtue, right? The virtue is the mean between two extremes. But even with this podcast, I mean, good distinctions listeners will keenly know that it's been a year since I posted anything really, because I've been working on a dissertation, which is finally drafted. But in that time, I realized, I said to one of my friends the other day, I said, I'm going to bring the podcast back, but I'm only going to interview people that I want to, when I want to, on my schedule. And I don't care about the algorithms. I don't care about, posting schedules, social media, any of that. So whoever listens, listens, and, praise God if it helps people in some way. But, one of the things that you mentioned in your article is algorithms that are terrifying, really, if you think about it. But for those listening, what is an algorithm and what does it matter?
I think it matters a great deal. I think let me rewind our listener or your listeners back to pre 2010, before the smartphone was even invented, when the computer was kind of the only way to get on the internet. I want you to think about pre social media, where everyone had a website who was popular if need be, or a blog. And so you would go on these blogs, you'd go on these websites, and you'd be able to read the articles, you'd be able to watch, maybe even watch a little bit of a video, because you obviously, the bandwidth on those websites were not big enough to carry a huge video unless you were like BuzzFeed or something like that. But what did you end up doing? Well, you'd be able to go down to the comment box after the article and you'd be able to comment, and then people would have a nice little conversation. Sometimes it wouldn't be so nice, but ultimately there was nothing controlling what you saw. It was everyone's, whoever had the first comment was the first, and then the second comment was second. And that's kind of how you were able to operate on the pre-social media internet. And it was great. It was, for better for worse. We definitely had our scrums and we had our issues, but it was a great way to be able to get information out, and real people would comment and people would be able to respond, right? It mimicked a reality almost of what a real conversation would look like if it was delayed, or if we were writing notes to one another, right?
Hmm.
And so that type of, reality of that type of conversation is more like a reality than what we currently have, which is basically a, a constant dumpster fire. When social media started developing these algorithms, we have to understand what an algorithm is. A lot of people think that an algorithm is some guy in a penthouse high rise in New York City who is watching and seeing everyone's user profile and just immediately uh, sending information or videos or messages to those people directly. And maybe this guy has a whole bunch of people working for him that do the same thing. So it's a bunch of people that are behind screens that are basically sending you things that they think that you're going to like based on your preferences. That's not an algorithm. That would be akin to what would be like an editor for like the New York Times or any other newspaper that you would think of. An algorithm isn't an editor. An algorithm is a sophisticated AI that basically takes your user profile preferences and then matches them up with all of this content that gets uploaded to the internet literally ad nauseum. Like billions of kilobytes and terabytes of memory are uploaded every single day. And most of it is, generic nonsense. Some of it's pretty good, but ultimately it's going to send you information that it thinks you're going to like. It's going to be curated for you. This would be a definition of what I call hyper reality. Hyper reality is basically, it's not necessarily real. It's a curated piece that has been edited and filtered and sent to you so that you'll enjoy it and click that like button and maybe even share or subscribe. So an algorithm, this a whole existence, it was created by maybe it was that penthouse high rise guy in New York City that basically he just pushes the button, the algorithm does all the work for him, and it's supposed to accomplish basically two tasks. It's supposed to make the user more addicted to their screens, and the second task is to make that person money. And so
Hmm.
the algorithm basically gets you caught up in that money making scheme, and it also gets you more addicted to your screens.
Well, and anyone who's really seeking to understand what an algorithm is should be terrified. I mean, that should cause us to at least think, maybe this isn't the best thing in the world. Uh, I've talked to people out in the real world, quote unquote, that say, "Oh, I don't mind that. It'll tell me exactly what kind of things I want to buy, and you know, um, the visions of airports walking through, and the screen changes because it uses facial recognition to say, here's something you would like, and stop by the store, Will, to get whatever, whatever." That's horrifying to me.
Yeah.
I, but to some people, it isn't. So really, what we have here is uh, a cultural divide that continues to become more complicated, nuanced. Because at the same time, well, my students at the high school, for example, uh, they'll talk about how social media is terrible. They hate it. They absolutely hate it. And yet they can't stop going back to it. They say it's the worst thing. It's horrible for my mental health, but they're constantly on it. Well, is it simply addiction, or is there's something deeper going on? Is it a cultural pull? I mean, how does the spiritual sort of enter into it? I mean, there's a lot of intertwined questions. So I mean, how do you help people make sense of this?
So to kind of backtrack, the whole idea of this, I, to answer your question, it is a cultural norm, and
Mm,
it's basically become what's called a behavioral addiction, but one that has been allowed. So when you think about
mm, mm,
addictions, let's just go back to let's go to a drug addiction or alcohol addiction, right? When somebody's addicted to drugs or somebody's addicted to alcohol, they usually show signs of it, whether they're showing up drunk to a party or even to church or anything like that, or maybe their teeth are turning a different color because they're addicted to nicotine, or maybe they smell because they haven't taken a shower in a couple of weeks because they're I don't they, that's hyperbole, but there are different signs that you can tell if somebody's addicted to drugs or addicted to alcohol. The thing that happened is that when technology became a normal part of our life and everyone started pushing it, we all started getting what's called behavioral addiction. Now, behavioral addictions are hard to catch. I'm trying to think of a different type of behavioral addiction. Let's just say like OCD, for example. If you have obsessive compulsive disorder, that one you can kind of that obviously there's signs, but usually people who have OCD aren't easily as tracked unless it's by like their close family members who know them really well. Like you can get away with being OCD, and no one would know because you can kind of cover it up, right? That's what behavioral addictions do. Um, and a behavioral addiction on our screens basically has become normalized across
Mm,
not especially Western world, but pretty much the entire world is basically allowing themselves to be taken away by technology in this way. I'm trying to think, back in the 2010s when smartphones first came to be, it was rude to answer your phone in the middle of a conversation. It was rude to be texting while people were present and
yeah.
you were in the presence of a group of people. You went to a party, you didn't have your phone out, right? Now that's like what people do at parties. That's like that's what people do like in on dates now. Like they just kind of go and watch TV, and while the TV's going on, they have music going on their Alexa, and while the Alexa's going on, they also are both on their smartphones and they're showing each other the funniest meme that they have. And there's no real communication going on, and it's like, well, what are we doing here? Well, that's normal. That's what people do. And like you said, yeah, that should scare us. That is
Yeah,
very
it should.
frightening because it's basically, like I said earlier, it's attaching us to this hyper reality in a way that is unhealthy. And as soon as those screens get taken away, as soon as our batteries need charging, we feel that sense of, oh no, now I have to deal with reality. And that hurts, but that's not what it should do. It should feel enlivening. Reality should be the thing that motivates us to wake up every morning. But it doesn't because everyone has kind of accepted this whole idea that screens are the new normal.
Well, and one of the things that made me think about with your example of the party and people just on their phones is and I know people like this where memes, reels, that is their personality. That is their humor, which is terrifying. It's horrible because I think about I have a couple really close guy friends. We hang out at least once a week if possible, and that is life-giving. And my wife, God bless her, is like all in on that. Like, go be with your friends. It's important because it is, and that's how we recharge. We share in brotherhood with each other. We share each other's struggles, and we can speak to one another's growth and virtue, and just being there for one another. But it's also just a lot of fun because we don't have our phones out. We're actually conversing with one another. Whatever comes to mind, that's what we talk about. And it gets wild sometimes. I mean, it's like all over the place. But there's no comparison with the just the wit, the humor that comes out of those conversations is so much better than anything that somebody can cook up on a reel. And so many, it's not even just that people, people are missing out. No, it's not that. It's that a lot of these technologies, and you mentioned this in your article, AI is substituting our thinking. It's substituting our conversations. It's substituting our humor, our wit, our ability to create. Uh, yeah, I mean, if you would just speak to that a little bit. I know that you wrote about it quite a bit in the article, and it's you have a lot of good things to say on it. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you share with our audience.
Awesome. Well, I'm actually going to refer to you to a different article I wrote. This one's called Offloading Humanity. You can check that out on my Substack. But this one will kind of segue into how I see view AI. Um, Technology's kind of really done a number on our souls, but it's also done a huge number on our minds. The first problem with technology is that when you think about, and since obviously you're a Thomist, when you think about the three powers of the soul, we have the intellect, the will, and the passions, right? The emotions. What we've ended up doing is we've allowed screens to kind of kidnap those.
Mm,
We first started it back when we offloaded our memories onto Google. I can't. I know my. I used to know phone numbers by heart. I used to know Simpsons lines. I used to know NBA statistics. I used to know everything. But now I can. My memory. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or not, but I used to have a stronger memory. Now I don't, and it frustrates me, But that was our first kind of misstep. Is we kind of lost our memory, and the memory is tied to the intellect. And if you're not
hmm.
using your
Yeah.
memory, your intellect becomes weaker. And so if you use a piece of technology such as Google or even AI, or any other type of AI to help you remember things, to like fact check things, that's probably not the best thing because you're basically you're maimed. You're kind of using a crutch, you know? And so our first misstep was basically we offloaded our memories. The second misstep now, as AI is becoming more and more prevalent in our society, is that we're offloading our imagination onto
Mm.
AI. So if we've lost our memories to Google and we're losing our imagination to AI, we're becoming less and less human because we're losing our ability to use our intellect. Our intellect is based on those two things, memory and creativity, our imagination. Uh, Granted, we still have our physical selves, so we can still experience the world and we can still, touch and feel and see things, right? But that's actually the next misstep after AI is that we'll be offloading our reality to VR. And then we won't be able to touch, see, smell, or anything. We'll just be viewing and experiencing this hyper reality in the most three-dimensional way. Now, we're at the AI stage right now, and if we don't do an about face, I think we're in trouble with VR because it could potentially really change the way that our souls are, that the way that we define our souls. Because if we don't have an intellect, we don't have a will, we're basically less than human, and that's something we want. That should be very, very, very scary. Um, the idea of AI kind of bringing itself into our souls and basically, you know, allowing us to sacrifice our ability to create, there's a lot of different effects to that. We've already experienced a few of them. We're going to have fewer conversations with real people. There's already documented scientific studies of people who have become addicted to their conversations with AI and have already grown to early dementia and early offset like inability to communicate with others. We were already having fewer conversations with others people thanks to social media, but now AI is basically cornering the market. Because if I don't have to talk with people and I'm an introvert, now I can go and talk onto ChatGPT and it will be my companion. And there's actually been people who have already tried to put in to their courts to be able to marry ChatGPT, and it's like that's okay, that's crazy. um, Cal Newport, he's a big tech critic as well. He recently did a podcast on how we are now we have lower IQ scores across the entire globe, and it's a short little dip, but it's the reason is because our memory and our intellect is basically being sabotaged through a lot of these screens. There's also more mental instability. Columbia University just did a recent research that talks about how there's so many more mental illnesses going on, not only in adults but especially in children. There's more school shootings. There's more despair. There's the tick in suicide rates is sky high, higher than it's ever been. And it basically is we have all these red flags, and yet a lot of people are still normalizing this behavior and saying, hey, we aren't going to put laws in place. We're not going to set rules because the people who are who would be in the positions of power to make those rules are probably addicted too and wouldn't be able to follow through with them. And so there you have basically the sabotage of the will because now I can't even I mean, as parents, sometimes we tell our kids, do as I say, not as I do. That's a horrible thing to say to your kids, but at the
Yeah.
same time, that's kind of what the world is telling us. Here are all these red flags. Here's all these scientific studies.
Mm.
And that spiritual inclination that you have in your soul that you feel that this is a dark thing and you can't escape it. Well, who's going to be the person that's going to be standing out and saying, "Hey, we need to slow down," because if we don't, we're basically condemning our souls to allowing the technology hyperreality of world to basically overcome what is true reality.
Mm. I think, yeah, and I'd love your take on this, but it seems like the only way out is to help people experience the true good and beautiful. It's to help them experience reality, not this hyper reality that you say. And that might take time and it might be difficult and it's going to involve suffering to some degree, some sacrifices. But I see this at our school. We have a no cell phone policy, which is beautiful. Um, we use Chromebooks, which I wish we didn't have. So it's kind of this catch 22. But at least with the no cell phones, there's no social media. They can't access that. At lunch, there's no devices at all, so they have to speak with one another, and they hate it when they're freshmen. They absolutely hate it. By the time they get to junior year, though, they actually love it, and they say, "This is I feel much freer here than I do at home." Uh, and then I remind them that you don't have to use your phone when you leave, and they go, "Oh yeah." So it's like it really kind of works with what you're saying. It's like, okay, society culture has been saying it's okay to feed into these behaviors, but sometimes just saying you actually don't have to. It's okay if you don't. It's okay to be a little weird. Um, you know, you will be better off. Your children will be better off. I mean, it's I'm thinking about it for myself, and I'm thinking about it for my kids. It's there the way that I have been thinking about it the last couple days is it's almost like there's this shift within, not within the soul itself, but within like almost how the body and soul interact. There's a disalignment um, between our souls and our bodies, which is what you were speaking to with the how the intellect is affected, how the will is affected. But how do we align people back? Is it simply a matter of, well, don't use AI, don't use your technology? Because I can't imagine that's the answer. So what would you, if you had 30 seconds in an elevator with someone and you said, all right, here's how you're going to realign your life, what would you tell them?
Well, I think this is actually one of the benefits of the Amish is the Amish, they never they do allow certain technologies within their culture, but they all meet and they talk about it and they say, okay, how is this going to help us spiritually? How is this going to help us become a better and better people? And so they
Hmm.
do use certain technologies, but they limit themselves to only the ones that as a whole they'll be able to benefit from. I think that's what we need to do too. I think we need to really think about AI and technology in general and really kind of have a communication piece about it, show all the data, but more importantly, it's got to be based on love. And so, just recently, my own students, I found out that they were having, they had a Google Doc that they were using as social media, and so they were on the Google Doc and they were, publicizing these things that shouldn't never be publicized. I caught wind of it. I took a look at it, and we all had, I'd say, about 2 or 3 day. Uh, 2 or 3 day purging of all of our Google Drives of things that were non-academic. And it took forever, but they've been doing this since, second, third grade. They figured out how to use slides, they figured out how to use docs, and some some of the things that they created were pretty cool. They have like a comic book club and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, you should probably keep that. But like there was just other stuff that was, that pertains to the vices that they have in them. And it's what we need to do is call that out. And it starts first and primarily with parents. Teachers can do as much as they can, but nobody really wants to go to school at first, so it's not like the teachers are going to have a great deal of say. But the parents themselves have to be unaddicted to their tech. That's going to be the first step. Parents really have to put their own cell phones and technology use in check before they can teach their kids how to do it. And that's probably going to be our hardest sell. That's going to be the hardest thing to do because what the parents do, the children will do. And from my own story, putting limits on technology has been probably the hardest part of being a parent because all my kids go to public school as well, and all their friends have phones at the age of like 2.5, and like they're just it's astonishing how hard it is for them to avoid the pressure of saying I want a phone.
Hmm.
Um, all my kids are different. I have five, and so they have different degrees of how much they want it and how much they don't want it. But to be able to train children in the art of reality, to be able to ingrain them in the virtues, finding ways to do so without screens is the number one way of getting kids to enjoy life and actually be happy. Challenging them to not be on screens, to limit them to the point of let's use these as only academic things. There are many other ways you can entertain yourself. You don't have to use a screen as entertainment. That's probably the worst thing we can teach our kids is that these were meant to entertain you. They're not. They're made to make you better. And so that's the policy I adopted in my own classroom is
Hmm.
this is only used for
I like
academic
that.
purposes. This is the only thing you're going to use it for. If you see this Chromebook and you see a game, it's not happening. If you see this Chromebook and you think it's going to be, an entertaining piece of technology, it's not going to happen. It's got to be something that's going to advance you intellectually and build your knowledge. Now, if you get a phone and your parents are allowing you to do that and you like social media, okay, well, let's figure out what our limits are going to be because we have to have limits. Everything has to have limits. If I eat food, I have to have a limit. If I go outside and exercise, I have to have a limit. How come we don't have the limits set personally on our phones? I think we need that. We need to be able to vocalize it. We need to be able to showcase that, hey, one of the best things about being Catholic is this whole idea of redemptive suffering. It's this whole idea of delayed gratification. We are imperfect people until we get to the beatific vision and we actually see Jesus. And so the same should be on our phones and our screens. Yes, there is the temptation to use them as entertainment pieces, but that's not what they're meant for. That might be like frosting on the cake, but they're meant to help you grow. They're meant to help you become better. They're meant to help cure your hunger or cure cancer, if you will, or like dialogue with people from across the world about deep questions to evangelize. All these things are good. What we have to figure out what's the bad and how can we limit the bad to be able to pursue screens with virtue.
That's beautiful. I absolutely love it. I just want to add that if you're listening and especially if you're a parent and you've already kind of let the technological genie out of the bottle and your children have screens and have all these different things, it's not too late to reverse course. Um, it
I have a
isn't.
story about that.
Well, I'll tell mine and then you can tell yours
Yes,
because
please.
I and this was tough. My he's now 8, but when he was 7, he had my son had a Nintendo Switch, loved it, played Mario, played all these things, Zelda. Like it was tons of fun. I played it too, and um, he was playing it. I was limiting him to, there's the limits. I said, okay, 1 hour per Saturday, something like that. And we got it down to this small whittled thing. He was asking me about it every day during the school day. Like he was just in a mood and he was kind of feisty and he was just kind of a jerk. And my wife and I were like, we got to do something about this because it's all he thought about. It's just I got to get my hands on the Switch again. And so I said to him one day, and he's a pretty deep thinker when I can get his attention. And I said, do you think this is good? Do you think the fact that you think about the Switch every day is healthy? And he was like, you know what, Dad? No. I was like, how would you use your time if you didn't have the Switch? He was like, probably play Legos. Legos are pretty great. I'm like, all right, tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Let me sell your Switch at the pawn shop, and I will buy you a Lego set. And he said, "All right, let's do it." And we haven't looked back.
That is
We got the
awesome.
Lego set, and it was great. The other day he said, "Man, I wish I never sold that Switch." I'm like, "No, it was a fantastic decision. Don't doubt yourself."
That's great. That's great. But the thing is that you're having the conversation. A lot of parents are afraid to have that conversation. And unfortunately, a lot of parents aren't even in tune to their own children's experiences to even notice that
Yeah.
they're addicted because they too are also on their phones on Instagram or on Facebook. Um, my story is kind of a lot different, actually. My fourth child was born, and so we had four children, five and under. And both my wife and I are working full time, and I'm homeschooling the older one. So I'm going to work all day. We're not sleeping at night, and I'm teaching in the evening a 5-year-old who is already tired from working all day, right? So what we ended up doing is we fell into the trap of I think we got some Amazon Fire or something or other. I can't remember the tablets.
Hmm.
So all four of them, no, three of them had tablets so that we could get some rest, basically. The tired parent syndrome. I think a lot of us have fallen into this where you give
Oh
your kid a
yeah.
screen and just kind of we'll let that one be the babysitter, right? And for a while there, it worked out pretty well. And we were like, oh, this is great until the battery, would go out and then they'll start crying because they don't know how to attach the cable to the thing and to the outlet. And so we'd have to go and get up and that would frustrate us. They'd be frustrated. They'd be crying. Anyway, my fourth child, he's kind of that, he's that one child. He's the one that's gonna, earn my wife and I heaven. And he's been like that ever since he was born. Love him to death, but he would he actually over the course of I think 3 weeks, found out a way to get a hold of his siblings' tablets and throw them onto the kitchen floor to the point that they would break on impact. And every single time, it wasn't like just like a constant throw. It was like, oh, here's one. Let's see if this one worked like the other ones. Boop, poof, and it would break, right? So we were down to two tablets, and then they had to learn how to share, and then they were all mad because they couldn't watch what they wanted to watch because the brother didn't want that. And then it was down to one tablet, and they're like, "Oh wow, we better really try to reserve this and keep our little brother away from this." Nope, he found out a way to get to that one too. They smashed all three, and this is right before Lent, and it was the greatest thing in the world because my wife and we're both teachers, and we had four kids, five and under, and we're early in our careers. We couldn't afford anything more. And we're like, you know what? We're not going to invest in this. And so we turned that off. We turned off the TV. We got Legos. We got all the cool things. We got paper, construction paper from school, glue, all these leftover school supplies. And they were the best of friends. There was no arguing. There was no crying. They were patient with their little brother. They taught him how to do all these cool things. And I'm like, wow, how come I couldn't willingly do this? Like, why did my son have to come and break these for this to occur? Like that was my big question. And I'm like, thank God for your little brother. Because even now when he acts up, everyone's like, oh, Michael, Michael, Michael. His name is Michael. Why you da, da, da? I'm like, hey, you better be thankful for Michael because if it wasn't for him, you guys would be addicted to screens and it would be all my fault. But these little incidences, it's like, ah, man, parents, we just gotta wake up. And sometimes it
Amen.
takes, a 2-year-old to break iPads and to wake us up.
So, how did God reach you? Well, my 2-year-old breaking iPads. Yep. Oh man. Yeah, it's we do have to wake up. I think I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope that those listening feel empowered to and inspired to disconnect, disconnect from all these things that are keeping us from being the people that God created us to be. The glory of God is man fully alive, not man doom scrolling. And we definitely need to just root ourselves more deeply in reality. I love the way that distinction you make between reality and hyper reality because it's so true. Um, and I imagine some people say, "All right, well, I need to do all this at once. I need to disconnect. We need to establish, uh, more prayer routines and more, uh, just go kind of crazy." And I would only say, start with something manageable, but do something. That's what I would offer.
Yeah, I agree. In my article, I said that we're basically at a tipping point in society where technology is advancing faster than our brains are capable of focusing on both reality and hyper reality at
Mm.
scale. We're going to have to choose. And if we choose the hyper reality side, my fear is that we will, eventually lose our souls. But to piggyback on what you just said about starting somewhere, it, it's all got to start with a conversation with ourselves, conversation with our Lord in adoration. It's all got to start with silence, but it's also got to be that conversation for many people is going to feel very heavy because the natural reaction of a world with screens is to ignore the silence, ignore the heaviness of that burden, and go right to the screen for that dopamine hit.
Mm.
As we approach Advent, as we get into Lent a little bit later in the liturgical year, these are great times to really think about having that heaviness weigh on us and just see what happens. Because the greatest accomplishments that humans have ever achieved in all history of the world is because they've been burdened to do it. It's why Jesus, died on a cross. He carried it. That's when we show what our true colors are. When we sit in that heaviness of the reality, so that we can further advance and grow in virtue to become the saints that we were meant to be.
Amen. Well, no better place to end than that. TJ, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for
It's
coming
been an
on.
absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Great. And for those listening, please go to the Substack, gooddistinctions.com, subscribe, uh, shoot me an email at gooddistinctions@gmail.com if you want me to write about a specific topic, or you can propose guests that I can invite. Um, the podcast is now off airplane mode. I'm going to be releasing some things slowly. So TJ, thank you for being my first guest after about a year. It's been a real pleasure.
Likewise, thank you so much.